Welcome to Trust Talks with BBB Serving CT. I'm Kristen Johnson. In business, trust talks, and Better Business Bureau's mission is to enhance marketplace trust. In each one of our episodes, we hope to do that by showing you what to look for, what to look out for, and what to expect when shopping in different industries. Hopefully, we can help you spend your money wisely and avoid being scammed. Nearly half of all household moves happen between May and August every year. Movers are one of the top categories inquired about at Better Business Bureau's website, bbb.org. In 2021, we received more than 1.4 million inquiries, ranking moving 22nd out of the 4,640 industries that we count in the number of inquiries BBB receives. Now, most people only hire a mover a few times in their lives, so finding the right mover might be an unfamiliar process, leaving us more likely to be prime targets for scammers. Ken DeLude, owner of Burt Hill Moving and Storage, joins us now. Burt Hill Moving and Storage is in East Granbury as well as Western Massachusetts. He's going to walk us through the process of hiring a mover and tell us some of the important questions we should be asking to avoid some of the most common moving scams out there. Ken, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate having you here.
Oh, thank you.
First of all, tell me a little bit about your company.
Well, I started with my father. We took over at Burt Hill in 1970. I graduated out of high school in 71. That's when I actually worked full time. And the reason I joined my father was because, you know, for part-time, I was working from part-time, and I noticed that a lot of movers weren't very ethical. They weren't very professional. And I thought, wow, this would be a great business to step into, and which it was. And you know, so I really focused on quality moving and focused on the customers, on their needs and wants, and taking the stress out of their moves.
Now, Burt Hill has been around a very long time. We've got a photo, black and white photo. This company dates back more than a century, correct?
Yeah, 1915.
Wow. Who do we see in this picture?
Well, you see Burt Hill Sr. and his son, Burt Hill Jr.
Who your father then purchased the company.
Right, right.
And you've been a mover for over half a century.
Yeah,
so
53 years.
How has the industry must have changed in that time?
Yeah, it changed. Yeah, through the years, it changed, you know, quite a bit, up and down and what have you. Yeah, I mean, I get back then, you know, we didn't have cell phones to begin with, so that's, you know, that's going way back. And when we had to call in on a payphone, either that you can hide and nobody from the office will know where you are. I mean, but that's you know, and
just technology has changed so much in that time.
Yes, yeah, and back then they didn't have any technology. I mean, everything was when we booked a job, we put things down on a notebook, and each page was a day of work. And then, but today we have a movers program. Booking program into the computer.
So sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I imagine the housing market and moving industry are very interconnected, and the housing market has just gone crazy the last couple of years since the pandemic. So how has that impacted your industry?
Well, we had a lack of homes on the market. You know, I guess people sold their homes. With the lack of homes, the values of the homes went up, or the cost of homes went up. Right. So people were cashing in on their homes, taking the money and putting their stuff into storage, and hopefully that you know, in a year or so that their prices will come down.
So it's kind of slowed down for moving, but you also do storage, and that part of the business is probably doing very well.
Right, the storage is doing very well. And you notice that you have storage business popping up all over the place because storage is such a big thing today. But on the other hand, the moving part of it, because of lack of homes, lack of moving, and also we had a lack of help. So we have a problem on both ends at this year. Last year we didn't have enough help for the work, and this year we just didn't have enough work for the help. So yeah, so that's kind of a
That's an issue.
It
That's
is
an
what's
issue.
going on, yeah.
And so everyone wants to move. They want to make the most of the housing prices right now, but they have no place to go.
Yep.
So that they're storing all their stuff
Yeah,
with you
yeah.
instead.
And some of these people also want to go down south. I got some people in storage and say, Ken, we're still looking for a place, down in the Carolinas or down Florida, but we can't find anything.
So it's not just here in Connecticut.
Right. So it's not here in Connecticut. It's all the way down the East Coast. Yeah.
So you said moving has slowed down a little bit. So how far in advance do people need to book a moving company?
Well, I would say usually the process is 6 weeks from the time they sell their house to the closing. But even then, you want to give yourself as much flexibility as possible because you don't want to be stuck, on the moving day and all of a sudden comes up and now you're not be able to close right then, or you got to find a mover at the last minute.
And finding a mover at the last minute means you might be more susceptible for falling for a scam.
Right.
Or finding someone who maybe is a little unscrupulous or not following marketplace standards.
Right. Okay.
What should people be looking for in a moving contract?
Oh, they should be looking for, one of the things is the liability section of the bill of lading.
What does that mean?
That means that it actually covers, the consumer and also covers the mover. It puts a limit on liability.
And how much you're owed if your stuff ends up being broken or lost or that sort of thing?
Yes, yeah. For example, 60 cents per pound would be your no fee liability. That comes automatically. If you wanted a full value, which comes up to $6 per pound, and you'll pay a little additional for that. But it stops at $6 a pound. But if you have something that's more valuable, then at that point there, we come up with an insurance policy.
So it's not just a matter of you want to see that there's a clause in there for liability, but you want to make sure you read what you're allowed under that policy.
Right.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of licenses or certifications should consumers be asking to see when they're choosing?
Well, first off, if you're moving within the state, okay, you have a Connecticut DOT number, okay, in Connecticut. In Mass, we have Mass DOT number or Department of Public Utilities. And in the interstate, you have a motor carrier number, which is the interstate. And then what's controlled on safety in all three of them is the Mass Department of Transportation. So there's quite a few different levels of license and authorities that you got to deal with.
And if you don't see that on their website or they can't give that to you when you call them up, that's a red flag.
Right. I mean, actually on their advertising or the website or wherever they got their name, they should have their license number on there.
Okay, that's a good piece of advice.
And this way here, they can call the state to check on their, on their.
You can actually look it up with the state.
Yeah.
Are there any professional organizations you should check to see if the mover is a part of?
Yes, there are Movers Association. I know Mass Movers has one, but believe it or not, Connecticut does not have it. They have a trucking association, but it's not focused on household goods.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit of it, but it's not too much. That's why, Connecticut has their problems with liability and stuff.
You see the problems here in the state?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what you see?
Well, what I've heard, well, we have our own moving within your state pamphlet.
Okay.
Which kind of explains the liability,
responsibility. That's a good thing to have.
That we give Connecticut customers.
Okay.
Moving for within the state.
Okay.
So we're all on the same page, and so they understand. Connecticut normally doesn't have this. Their association does not have this.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit into the scams now. With the amount of moving activity during the summer, the potential to fall victim, of course, increases. And there are several different versions of moving scams that a BBB hears about every single year. The first is a consumer receives a quote, they pay a deposit, but then the mover never shows up. How can we avoid falling for this?
Okay, well, first of all, it's illegal to take a deposit.
Oh. No deposits.
No
Illegal in the
deposits.
state.
No,
Okay.
no deposits. I mean, we have customers that like to give deposits because they feel more secure that way, but we don't recommend deposits.
Not okay. So we often say don't put down too much money.
Yeah.
But you're saying don't put it any down. Okay, well that's good. I was going to ask you the typical down payment for a move, but it sounds like it's zero.
Yeah. We don't ask for deposits.
Okay, that would be a red flag then.
And if it's an interstate move, it's definitely illegal to ask for get a deposit.
Very good to know. Okay, this next scam is probably the most common. The U.S. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which regulates interstate and international moves, reports 57% of the complaints it receives involves overcharging. So a moving truck company provides a quote based on an expected weight, and then after loading the truck, they inform the consumer that the load is over the expected weight and an additional fee will have to be paid. Most of the time, the additional fee is significantly more expensive per pound, sometimes as much as double the original estimate.
Yeah.
Ken, how do we avoid this?
Well, okay, that is definitely a scam. Okay, first of all, we do an interstate move, or any move actually, you have to have an in-house estimate. And on an interstate move, see, you talk about the Federal Motor Carrier, which is that's interstate.
Yeah.
Okay. If the cost goes over the estimated cost, the maximum on a non-binding estimate, the maximum payment, you get your goods is 10% over the estimate.
That's the maximum that you're going to pay.
That's the maximum, yes.
Is that written in the contract,
Yes.
or because it's federal law?
Well, it's both.
It's both. Okay, so you need to look for that in the contract,
yes,
though.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Any other tips to avoid this? You think that's the key?
Well,
one right there.
That's the key.
Okay.
That's the key. And the whole thing is too, I mean, you can look up anybody's license, with their license number with the Federal Motor Carrier, and they'll give you a rundown on the company.
And you can always go to bbb.org too, and that way you can actually see if any government action has been taken against a business.
Yeah.
That goes for any business, but movers included. And a little bit later, we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can rectify the situation if you feel like you're in the midst of being scammed by something like this. Because it's hard when someone has your goods. It's like, well, I need to get them moved. So what do I do now? So we're going to have some tips on what you can do. But I want to talk about the third scam, because this is probably the most disruptive and also the most difficult to anticipate. This is when everything appears to be going well. The movers provided an estimate. They arrived on time. They load your belongings on a truck. However, this is where the interaction turns quite disastrous. When the truck fails to arrive at its destination, either your belongings are simply gone, the company requires the consumer to pay an additional fee to have them delivered, basically holding your possessions hostage. Are there red flags that we should be looking for to avoid this?
Well, again, going back, making sure that their advertising has their license number on there. You check into that. And the main thing is to, check with your realtor, check with your friends, ask around, who's a trusted mover.
Get references.
Yeah. References is the big thing.
Research.
Yes.
That's always our tip. So earlier this year, U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal called on the federal government to enforce penalties against these bad actors. What do you think needs to be done, or can anything be done to stop these scams?
Well, I notice on the road, is most of the time when you get pulled over, they do a safety check on your truck. Very rarely do they check your paperwork. They should be checking your paperwork. And it seems like they'll check a lot of the freight companies' paperwork, but they kind of shy away from household goods paperwork. For what reason, I don't know. But as many times I've been on the road and been, inspected, I probably maybe once or twice actually got to see your paperwork. All the other times, no.
Okay.
So if somebody's doing something illegally with, they can certainly get away with it as long as their truck passes inspection.
Gotcha. Are there any other dishonest practices? Maybe not full-fledged scams or something that's illegal, but something that's definitely substandard marketplace practices, something unethical that we should be watching out for when we're looking for a moving company?
Oh, I mean, one of the things is that if you already booked a mover and they show up at your house, I mean, something like that, if they pull up with a truck without their name and their and where they operate out of and their license number, or no DOT number, no nothing. That's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, you don't want to hand your stuff over to someone who just rented a truck for the day to move your stuff.
Right.
You want them to have the equipment already in.
Right.
Okay, so we've hired a mover. They're at our home or at our apartment. Now, what should we be looking for, or what should we be looking out for beyond what you just said when they come to move our things?
Well, what we do is when we present ourselves and we have the bill of lading in our hand, and we ask for to sign for this XCOD, the liability section, and then the time that we arrive. See, it's going by the time, and
when you say it goes by the time, you mean the cost goes by the time, or how is the time?
The job goes by the time.
Oh,
so it starts when you arrive, ends when you get done, and then there's a travel time at the end.
And that's more for
local.
Local, okay. And so what is the best way to keep track of your belongings to ensure that everything you pack gets to their destination? Do you want to make an inventory list? Like, what's the best way to?
Well, again, this is where you want to get a mover that you really trust to begin with. Okay. And inventory would help. I mean, if they take their own inventory. If you have the movers take the inventory, it goes by the hour, it's going to cost more time to do it.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, it depends how you want to look at it. And again, inventory doesn't really show the true inventory because things happen. For example, you can go in there, you can tag a box twice accidentally. Then you go in and you're marking off the numbers off the boxes. So you name off that one tag, but the other tag's not being called on. So now you think you're missing a box.
Okay. Is it true that movers are not liable for lost or damaged contents if you pack the boxes yourself?
Yeah, that's true because, mainly if that happens most of the time, it's the customer didn't pack it right in the box. Mm-hmm. It's got to be packing is a skill. It just, I noticed that when customers pack themselves, a lot of real nice crystal and all the real expensive glassware, they pack them in the box instead of up on end. They lay them down flat. And that's more likely is going to cause damage.
Oh, okay.
And those kind of items, I highly recommend having the movers pack professionally than have the consumer pack it themselves.
That was my next question.
I know the next one on the sheet there.
Is it better does it cost more though to have the movers pack for you? But in the end, it's probably better because there's less likelihood your stuff is going to be broken.
Right. Especially if it's really expensive stuff, really nice stuff. You don't want to get broken.
I've heard the term provable negligence. Like if you packed your boxes and something breaks, you have to be able to prove that the mover was negligent. How would you do that? Take a picture? Is there really
the only way you can prove it if you actually see the mover drop the box.
Okay.
That's it. Or they can actually bring the box in, and it's a box that they're concerned about. The customer can actually open it up and see if anything's broken or the way it was packed. Is another way that whether the mover was responsible or not.
Now, interstate moving is a bit more complex, and you've mentioned it a little bit previously. So consumers may presume that the truck that picks up your stuff and the workers who drive that truck will then load it and then unload it at the next destination. But interstate moving can be a lot more complex, right? Especially if you don't have enough stuff to fill the truck.
Well, what I do is, I go down with a tractor trailer, and we have different loads on a trailer, and they're divided by plywood. And I personally don't hire other people on the road.
You don't? Okay, that's what I was getting at. That sometimes your stuff will be put on a truck with other people's items.
Yeah.
Someone else will drive that truck.
Right.
Someone else will unload it. Someone else will drive yours to your new home.
Yeah.
So it's not always the same people touching it.
Yeah. I was always, we have our same drivers from our company do with this. We don't hire out.
Okay.
We're not an agent for another company.
Gotcha. So when researching interstate moving companies, what should we consider?
Well, it's a good question. Who's taking my stuff down from the start to the end?
You need to ask that, huh?
Well, yeah. And that's one of the things between our reputation and that question, because we bring it down ourselves. We don't give it to another mover.
Now, Burt Hill Moving and Storage, you've been accredited with Better Business Bureau for nearly a dozen years. Why did you seek that accreditation? What have you gotten out of being part of BBB?
Well, because we believe in the same thing as trust. I mean, I build my company on, people call it, they trust us. That's why, a lot of these things that people don't even bother with because they trust me, and they trust our company. We built that trust foundation, and being with B&B, it just, when people call and our name is there, it means that, there's a company that can be trusted.
Well, Ken, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but I thank you for answering my questions. A lot of good information. We want to get back to how to avoid rogue moving operators. And Better Business Bureau does have some suggestions. The first is don't just use a simple internet search to find a mover. At bbb.org, you can search the business profiles of more than 20,000 moving-related companies. There you can read reviews and complaints, check out how the company handled those complaints. You want to get 3 in-person or virtual estimates. Rogue operators rarely appear in person to give estimates. A low price estimate given over the phone can end up costing more than a legitimate mover charges. And get an estimate based on weight and not cubic feet. Scammers prefer to give estimates in cubic feet. Volume is easier to manipulate than weight, so they can later claim additional charges. And watch out for large deposits or cash demands. Other than a small down payment, honest movers don't have you pay until they have delivered your goods. And if you feel like you've been the victim of moving fraud, there are resources available to help. Let's look at this graphic. Move Rescue provides information to victims who feel they may have been scammed at any point in the moving process. Their website is moverescue.com, and there's also a phone number on your screen, 800-832-1773. You can also try the Department of Transportation at 188-DOT-SAFT or file an online complaint. Typically, the agency does not represent individual victims, but if there are patterns of complaint, they will issue fines, suspend registration, or revoke operating authority. You will need to provide the mover's license number, though, if you go that route. And if you feel like your items are being held hostage, you should always call the local police. You can check to see if others have reported a scam with a particular moving company by visiting BBB's Scam Tracker at bbb.org/scam tracker. If you feel like you've been targeted by a scam, report it here as well to warn others. BBB receives 13,000 complaints a year, complaints and negative reviews about movers. It's important to do careful and extensive research to make sure you are dealing with an honest mover. After all, Ken, you're allowing someone you don't know to take all of your prized possessions. Yeah. You want to make sure they're in the right hands.
That's right. And also by interstate law, this will be passed out to the consumer.
Your rights and responsibilities.
It tells you everything what you just said in it.
And I imagine that you can find all of that online as well. Ken, thank you so much for being such a great resource for everyone out there. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Ken DeLue with Burt Hill Moving and Storage. That does it for this edition of Trust Talks. We hope you've learned a lot. I know I sure have. We'll see you next time.
The water's warm at Jaws Pond, and we're stocked full of treasures. Big or small, we buy it all. We buy and sell fast rides, power tools, vintage guitars, and so much more. Walk the plank in style with our fine jewelry, diamonds, and watches. Plus, we have a huge selection of the latest video games, including the new PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Jaws Pond, conveniently located on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike in Southington and West Main Street in New Britain.